On today's edition of a very special eSpot exclusive, I have Roger Floyd, the uncle of George Floyd, and he's on the executive board of the George Floyd Memorial Center. Joining him today is also another member of the board, Keith McCorkel, who happens to be a Teamster member as well, and my good friend Rick Armstrong, who's a 20-year veteran of the police department, detective, and also part of the Teamsters. Actually, all the Teamsters are kind of my good friends. They're all joining me today to have this wonderful conversation where we're going to talk more about the George Floyd Memorial Center and how we can all get involved to make 525 DOE a day of enlightenment. Find out more today on the eSpot. Glad to have all of you here to have this conversation to see what we can do to really bring big change and really make big noise on 525, the anniversary of George Floyd's murder, and to really try to change it into a positive so he can change the world, much like his daughter Gianna had said. And
Yeah.
so, Roger Floyd, Mr. Floyd, can you go ahead and share a little bit about your initiative and what made you want to start something after going through such a painful experience?
Well, first of all, thank you, Camille, for the invitation. And yes, I'd like to jump right into it. Uh, the birthing of the George Floyd Memorial Center came as a result of obviously George's death, such an unfortunate loss for the family, such an unfortunate loss for the world. So after we basically saw the devastation that took place on May 25th, 2020, right before our eyes, we obviously were shocked to our system that that was our loved one that dealt with that inhumane tragedy as to how he departed his life at 46 years of age, gone too soon. So, as a family, once we accepted God's will, we later came together as we continue to recover from this tragedy. We came together several months back and met as a family unit. We are a family of faith. So as a result, my family and I got together and they immediately looked at me and just said, Roger, we have got to do something to maintain George's, what we call him Perry Jr., his legacy. So we would like for you to head that up. And I'm saying, you know, this is something new at that time for me, but it was a core blessing coming from my family that had the faith and confidence in me to take this monumental initiative on. And I took it on with grace. And I said, I'm going to immediately turn to my nephew. That's like a younger brother to me versus a nephew, Thomas Neal McLaurin. And when I went to him and shared this with him, and I let him know up front that I am appointing you as CEO and executive director of this initiative. And of course, he accepted it because he didn't have any choice. This is now Uncle Roger speaking to him. And I knew that he would have the energy to take this on without question. But we work in concert with one another as co-founders of the George Floyd Memorial Center. We were incorporated in the state of North Carolina October 2020 as a 501c3 public nonprofit. And we have been going at it, like Cuomo says, let's get at it ever since. And we know that this initiative has been ordained by God. And we always say we're going to follow God's will in this endeavor. Just lead and direct us. I'm not going to get on the religious soap right now, but I just want to let you know I'm a man of faith. So as a result, the 525 DOE, DOE, which stands for Day of Enlightenment, is something that evolved from a part of the organization that we are building. We have surrounded ourselves with team members, board of directors, such as one of the other guests now, Keith McCorkel, an invaluable board member going forward, helping us just navigate this course and so forth. We're being blessed with our endeavor. So what basically again evolved from this is the initiative of 525 DOE. And of course, 525 represents the date that George was murdered in Minneapolis by Derek Chauvin. But we want to sort of change the narrative of negativity, but we're going to continue to call his name unapologetic to keep his name and his legacy alive. So with the 525 DOE initiative, that is a fundraiser because we're a grassroots organization. Very little money to deal with, but we're moving forward. So this is a fundraiser for gathering funds to start one of our initiatives, and I'll get into that in just one moment. But on our website, www.georgefloydmc.org, we have apparel on the website that's for sale to generate funding for any and all initiatives that we have going on or goals of the center to develop into fruition, okay? So as a result, we want this to be a day of commemoration for George, what has taken place as a reminder. Because when you hear 9/11, we don't always think about 9/11, 2001, the year it occurred. But when you say 9/11, you immediately know, if you were born during that time frame, you know exactly what we're talking about. So going forward, when you hear 525, the world will know what that means. And we want to celebrate that every year going forward. Mm-hmm. That's what that's all about. And with the apparel that can be purchased on the website, we want everyone in the world, because we are getting international orders on the website as we speak, just to wear the apparel and represent that initiative. The cap, the t-shirt, the bracelet, mask.
Yeah, I just got my order in myself.
Thank
So
you for
I
that,
want to,
Camille.
yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about the fact that your initiative is about enlightenment and it is about building bridges and really an opportunity, since we do have Rick Armstrong and we're both our Wake County residents. It's such a great opportunity for us to really get that chance to start building those bridges in community now. So um, what would you like to see happen moving forward, as far, because I even did on your website, it has all these different things that are going on, and one of them is you can learn how to engage with a police officer, what to do when you get pulled over. So I took the test. The first time I made an 80 because I was like, I'm just going to see how I can do without even reading the information. Because truth be told, I had some experience, not on that side, not in the other side. But at the same time, I was curious, like from what I remember hearing as a kid, because I every Black kid, I think, or person of color gets the talk of what to do so you don't come off as a threat when you're pulled over. So I'm curious, what other initiatives, what other things would you like to see after being thrusted into this? Because your career, even before this, you were in insurance. And I'm sure even as someone that worked in insurance, you saw the dangers that gun violence and police brutality, I mean, so many different things that may affect our community in a whole. And I just wonder what, now that we have the chance to really speak to someone that could speak for us or even give us more of a voice and we'll hear it, what would you like to say? What would you like to see done? Yeah, well, I mean, at the same
And
time, I
Rick,
also
thank
want to
you
hear
for
from
being
Rick.
here as
What
well.
initiatives are they planning? Because I know we've talked offline about different things.
Yes.
So he's definitely an ear that'll listen,
Oh yeah,
and make a
and for
difference.
sure. You've heard the expression that's been said multiple or millions of times at this point about the talk and how, especially Black parents, people of color, have that conversation regularly with their children. How to be in compliance when you're stopped by the authorities. First, always be respectful. Listen well. Hands are visibly seen, so there's no threat there at all. Because at the end of the day, the police officer or law enforcement wants to return home to their family, and we want our loved ones to return home as well. So that's part of what the talk is all about. Some of the key points: cooperation with the authorities, non-threatening. And I think we see how that is, even with some of the friendly protests. Hands up, don't shoot, those kinds of things, because of the thought process that goes on every day in the minds of marginalized communities, Black people in general, people of color. Just be compliant on those occasions, because as a Black man in America, I am reminded every day of my life that I'm a Black man in America. Whether it's, in some sense it's directly shared with me by an expression, or just a thought process that I have to be cognizant of every single day. That's the reminder, whereby my white brothers and sisters, those that really have the mindset of white privilege, and those that don't think about it every day, but subconsciously they know they have it. Some don't even realize that they have it because it's not anything they have to even think about. It's there. It's there from day one. But I'm not mad at that. My thing is, I want my white brothers and sisters to be more cognizant of that, because that's what we are sharing with you unapologetically. And I have experienced that there is more conversation. And one of the reasons there has been, in my opinion, based on the feedback I'm getting, why that conversation has not come to the forefront until now is because really they didn't know what to say or how to approach it. Nothing was interfering with their lifestyle. And when you are of privilege, you decide what's important to you and what's not. You decide
how the resources are being spent, how they're being disseminated if you have control of those resources. Mm-hmm. And I will share with Rick up front, the George Floyd Memorial Center, we do not believe one iota about defunding the police. Mm-hmm. We need your protection and service. Mm-hmm. If we didn't have that, this would be a chaotic society. Mm-hmm. Totally. What we're saying in that vein is that there need to be some restructuring of how those funds are used by the great individuals that protect and serve us. More vetting of candidates when they come in. And truth be known, this is another avenue for the Ku Klux Klan to get to do exactly what they've always done. They're just in a different uniform. But that percentage of those rogue officers, as I said, is just a few compared to the number of those who come to the job every day to protect and serve. And as a society, or speaking for Roger Floyd, I am so grateful for that I can go out and I can feel safe about the police, the service that our police department, our law enforcement is providing as a whole. But we cannot miss the point that there have to be change, sensitivity studies, how we use the funds, and making sure those specific things are taking place within your department, and that you're focusing on that, and you're doing it openly, engaging in dialogue, saying that we're going to make a change, and we're going to clean up where we've messed up to move the process forward. Getting the substations back in the communities that you serve. Get out, meet the people on your beat, as it's been said back in the day, or in your communities that you serve. Get out, walk, get to know these people. So the first thing that takes place when there's an issue in the community you serve, you're not approached, those community members aren't approached with a gun. Pull trigger and ask questions later. Pull the taser, ask questions later. Go into that situation with a mindset to de-escalate versus escalating the situation and then it's totally out of control. And what is the result? The result is why we're having this conversation today. And especially in the community of color, it generally ends up in death. So there's a loss to the policeman, to law enforcement, and certainly a devastating loss to the family. So I said that to say we need to engage in discussion, open dialogue, listen to what the community is saying. Community, listen to what law enforcement is proposing. Get a meeting of the minds. Agree to disagree if you must. But I think we're so much better together than we are apart, being on the same page, moving forward. That's the goal of the George Floyd Memorial Center, how we can bridge that divide. Just as one of our initiatives is how, well, all of our initiatives with the center is about giving back. One of the first initiatives that we have on the books when we get the funding that we need is to give back in marginalized communities. And we're going to do that by providing technology training. I'm talking about technology training where you're actually certified to change your socioeconomic status in your community. Our first initiative, we call it Dynamic Towns. We're starting with the community of Rayford, North Carolina, the county of Hoke. Why there? It's a small community. Population, approximately 51,000 people. Socioeconomic average income, $19,000 a year. Two major employers, the education system, the school system, and a poultry plant. You know, we call them down home a chicken plant for the most part. We're doing that to establish first some stability, establish a ready workforce, and we'll promote industry to go there. And when industry realizes that you have a ready workforce, they will relocate there versus the constant migration from those small communities to go elsewhere.
More metropolitan locations, yeah, in order to seek employment.
Absolutely. Now, I just thank you so much for all of that information, and also just to hear your thoughts about defunding police, because it has been one of those very polarizing terms, because it sounds like they're taking away the police department, or that they want lawlessness. So I do appreciate hearing what your thoughts on that is, and having this opportunity to talk to Rick. I also want to hear from him what initiatives or what his thoughts are moving forward. And thank you so much again for being my guest today and just being open to even having this conversation on a Thursday at 10 o'clock, because I'm pretty sure you have tons of things to do as the police department spokesperson.
Right. And just to be clear, I'm not the spokesperson for the department. I'm spokesperson for the rank and file police officers. But I do thank you for having me on, Camille. It's certainly an honor. And I do want to send my prayers and thoughts to Roger for his loss of his nephew, because it was a tragic event, and it was horrible. And what has come of it seems to be what Roger has created. It looks to be a tremendous initiative. So I think what is so important is that dialogue that he speaks of, is that we have that dialogue between the community and law enforcement, to have a mutual understanding that we're not against each other. We need to support each other. And I think we are really on the same page. It's just the political divide in this country lately has just created so much polarism and, unfortunately, resentment towards the extreme sides. And when the reality is the vast majority of us probably agree with 99.9% of the initiative the campaign is formed. So I think with that those relationships in the communities. I worked in the Raleigh Police Department. I worked in a predominantly African American neighborhood my whole career, and you got to get to know the people. That's essential. You got to get to know the people in your beat area, and you got to build relationships. You have to have that trust, that respect, that dignity. And those three things are just essential when you do your job as a law enforcement officer. So I started my career in criminal justice as a police officer, and then as a union representative, I moved on to what I believe is economic justice, and also we have to deal with racial justice, because there are so many injustices within our country with race, and a lot of it has to do with the economics of our country and the criminal system, the way it's set up. So we have to really get into this and talk more about it and find out ways we can move forward. And I think some of the things that he's discussing about how we need to have conversations with our children, whatever the race is, that they need to listen to police officers. I think those conversations are certainly essential with, African-American community, but also within the Caucasian. I have those conversations with my son on a regular basis, because I know when I was a police officer, that was the biggest challenge, is if somebody's not listening to you, it creates so much potential for conflict. But when they do listen, we can really try to find a way to find some peaceful resolution. I always took pride in myself when I was a police officer. I would never want to use force. That was the last thing I wanted to do. So we talk about de-escalation. That should be the priority. Unfortunately, there are police officers that get into this job because it's fun for them to use force, and it shouldn't be that way. And we really need to focus on more about de-escalating and using, talking to people to find conflict resolution, And when people are all hyped up, I mean, I can tell you right now, I know ways to get people to get really pissed off. And I know there are a lot of cops that do that, and that should not be, that needs to be addressed. We need to find police officers that know ways to calm people down. And I used force, maybe I can count on one hand. And I was in a very high crime area when I did my job. And I did not use, I didn't even carry a taser. I only had to pull my gun a few times, never had to shoot my gun, never had to do any of that stuff, never had to, very rarely to have to use force, but I really prided myself on calming the situation down. I think we need to train police officers to be more de-escalating and try to find for a peaceful conflict resolution. I think that's a priority. And again, like Roger said, we need to have officers in the community building those relationships with people so the community knows who they are, they know them, they can trust them on both sides. And I think that would help a great deal, but that needs to be a priority. And we need to really stop making this about division and more about inclusion and being more united and less divided.
Do you know of any upcoming initiatives or any plans for any of those to start happening as far as training here locally?
No, I've always advocated for as a union representative, I have always advocated for better training for police officers. And actually, within the Raleigh Police Department, I will say there's excellent training. There's a 7-month police academy, an additional 5 months on training with a training officer. But then you will have other small departments where there does need to be additional training because the state only requires 3 months of law enforcement training in the state of North Carolina. And that is not nearly enough to be trained to do your job well. And so that's something that I think needs to be addressed also, is that there needs to be much more training within the departments and much more. You talk about the funding. I think there needs to be more funding of training for police departments so that they're well trained to handle all kinds of conflict resolution.
That's a very great point that it's only 3 months is required by the state because it takes 2 years to become a hairstylist.
Right,
6 months to
right.
become an
Yeah.
esthetician. I
I
can
know.
speak from experience because I taught that.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, wait, what?
It's funny.
But
We use that
you can carry a
example in a lot
gun.
of in the police academy. We use that example to do a lot. It takes 2 years to be a hairdresser, but to be a police officer, technically in the state of North Carolina, 3 months is all you need of training, which is it's not nearly enough.
Not if you can take someone's life, obviously,
Exactly.
or even help somebody's life in that sense, because I know
Save
they also are
somebody's
trained
life,
with
take
first
somebody's
aid.
life.
Yeah,
Right,
so you
right.
could very easily miss easy things like with George. One of the things was that he was going through epilepsy, and it was brought up in the trial that first aid is part of their training. So it's like even with that, you need a little bit more time with that, even so you could
Right.
make those distinctions.
Right.
But now, I'm curious for you also with the different things that he was saying with community involvement and with gun violence as well, since you were a police officer for 20 years and you've seen so many different changes now that you're more of a civilian in that sense as well.
Right.
What do you think we need to do in the community as well, just to kind of help bridge and, like just bring the community together on? Because as much as Black people can talk to Black people, we're not the ones that are really the ones causing racism in a way, so it's like
Right.
on your side
Right.
of things. I've heard you speak at the union hall because full disclosure, I'm a Teamster wife.
Right.
So and so I've heard you say these kinds of speeches, and Franklin as well, or Keith as well. I'm sorry, your name is saying Franklin, so it throws me off, but I've heard you say these things, so I'd love to hear you say it now, like with an audience outside of the union hall, what some of your thoughts are, what some of the things that people need to do to really speak up to try to make those differences. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think everybody needs to address the issue. It's not just the African American community. I think everybody in this country needs to address it. It's there. We see it. We know it's there. Like Roger said, it happens. It's every day, and Caucasians need to bring it out more often. They need to be more vocal about it. They need to recognize it more and speak on behalf of it more often. And that needs to happen more often. There's no doubt about it. We need to create more dialogue. I mean, these things need to happen more often, and that should be a priority in this day and age.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Rick. I really appreciate it. So, speaking of Mr. Keith, how did you get involved with the George Floyd Memorial Center and the initiative and so on?
Well, Camille, thank you for having us on. It's really unique how we came about. Roger mentioned his nephew, Thomas Neal McLaurin. Thomas and I went to ECU together. Thomas played football there, and we became friends. And so Thomas and I have been friends now over 40 years. And so when Roger started talking with Thomas, Thomas said, well, I know some of the guys, some of the people that I went to school with would be perfect for the board. And I was taken by surprise when Thomas called me, but I did not know that Thomas and George were first cousins. And I saw it on Facebook, and I reached out to Thomas right when it happened. And so, and I stayed with him throughout this whole thing when they were going through, before any of this was even initiated with the George Floyd Memorial Center. So when this came about, Thomas reached out to me and asked me if I would serve on his board of directors. And I was really proud to do that because Thomas and I are such good friends. And then all this started coming together. When I met Roger, we found out that we were fraternity brothers. And so, you know, that even just made more of a bond. And Roger, how about Rick is an ECU grad also? So he's another pirate. Yeah. So it's another pirate there. So and Rick, we have 2 pirates on the board. Well, 3 with Thomas on the board of directors with Sheila Green. But Camille, this whole initiative with the George Floyd Memorial Center is so important in this day and time because we need things like that and put in our communities where we can have something of substance that we can see developing to help out our communities. And Roger and Thomas has this vision, and they've picked us to help them with this. And I'm just looking forward to it. I really am. And as you know, as I approach a retirement next month, I'm going to need something to do. And so Roger's already picked me to do a whole lot of stuff. And Roger and I are gonna ride around this country, and we're gonna try to get this thing on their wheels to keep going. Certainly are.
I'm so proud of both of you. I mean, I'm proud. I'm very proud of everyone on this panel, of course, but I'm excited to hear that with your retirement, you already have a plan that's going to really keep doing what you've already been doing with the union, with speaking up for schools, drivers. Like you really are. I think we even call you the Reverend because of your different inspiring speeches. So I'm just glad to know that you're just keeping that momentum going and to do something that's going to bring a difference in our, not just in the union community, but in a whole. And I mean, I'm just really excited for you and all that this is going to bring. And I want to make sure that with the few minutes that we have left, that we really drive into the point that the goal is to try to make 525 a day of enlightenment, a day of bringing us together. And you mentioned earlier about the protests and so on, and I can't remember if this is on air or off. And I want to wonder what you think as far as like, how can we really support George Floyd's memory, and how can we support your family and really lift you guys in a place where you're feeling supported and you understand that we're here for you, and that this day will be a day of that we recognize that his life wasn't in vain, and he will change the world.
Thank you, Camille. I appreciate that so much. And Keith, thanks so much for your words. And yes, starting today, see, he's already working already, because it was so gracious of him to accept my invitation to join us here today. And join, when I said him, I was talking about Rick in general, and joining us in this process. And Rick, thank you for your candor. I really appreciate it, what you said. It meant so much to me coming from you. And with the George Floyd Memorial Center continuing this initiative, this is how we can stand together, come together, and move forward, changing tragedy to triumph. That's what the goal is here, changing the narrative from victim to one that we're going to be victorious. in our efforts. And we're going to do it together. Okay? Total inclusion. That's what this is all about. A day of enlightenment. When the world saw what happened on May 25th, 2020, there was truly an enlightenment when that took place. You make up your decision, the decision in terms of where we go from here. It starts with an individual. What is in the core of your being about making change, real change, coming together, touching base with your elected officials, putting legislation on the table. With this legislation, enacting bills that can be changed into law. Because when these type of egregious crimes take place by rogue law enforcement, there are truly consequences to be dealt with. And there's law there to support it. So these legal loopholes that we've seen over the years, that will stop. Those acquittals that the public felt should have been a conviction. That's the goal. So we invite total inclusion to get this process, move the needle forward. Thank you so much, Camille, for allowing me to share.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm curious, were you able to catch President Biden's address last night?
Have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system, and to enact police reform in George Floyd's name that passed the House already. I know Republicans have their own ideas and are engaged in a very productive discussions with Democrats in the Senate. We need to work together to find a consensus. But let's get it done next month, by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death.
Been passed in the House, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Bill. We just have to get the Senate involved to get that finalized. And that would be that's a strong beginning to say yes, as a society, as elected officials, we have gotten this started in the right direction. That's a great point. Thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm here to help. I'm just here to give voices and help give more people understanding what you guys want, because we hear so many different people saying what George Floyd, or they're using George Floyd's memory as a hashtag or a black square for their influencer, their entertainment, whatever it may be. But to hear it directly from the family, what your goals are, what your initiatives are, what your really hopes are, I feel it's important for us to hear it and to follow that suit, because you're the ones that truly paid the ultimate price in this. So thank you for sharing with us.
Great, my pleasure.
So is there any last word that anybody else wants to share?
Camille, I just like to share, with Roger and Rick. Roger, I've worked with Rick closely in the same office for the last 10 years. And I can truthfully say about Rick, he's always asking about what can be done differently. And he engages in conversation with me and other people about all this racial and injustice and how might police go about doing these things. And I see Rick engage with, and sometimes he takes a stance that the police does not like, and they just don't like it. But Rick stands up for what he believes he really does, and so he'll be an asset to when we have to do some kind of police initiatives and things like that. He'll be a great asset and a liaison between the police force here in Raleigh and Wake County, and our George Floyd Memorial Center. to help us in those things. Now I'm putting you out there, Rick.
I feel like you got
I
voluntold for
volunteered
something.
I know. Whatever Keith asks me to do, I'm there for him. Yeah, he's a brother.
Oh, I got it on record. I got it on
yeah,
record.
but I'm telling you, when he's an honest person, he's a good person, he's a good-hearted person, and he wants to do the right thing, and he sees both sides of the equation, and he's always been one of those with an open mind. When it comes, even though he was a policeman all those years, he still looks at stuff openly. And that blue shield that we talk about all the time. Yeah, he has his ways at times when it comes to police. But of course, he was a policeman and he sees it in a different manner than we would. But it's not one of those closed-minded ways that just shuts you down when you're trying to talk to him. And I'd just like to say that publicly, that Rick will definitely work with us and work with the police force, that we may be able to have a relationship between those police and then help us to know exactly what we need to do to get a better relationship with police.
No, absolutely. The reason that I decided to even have Rick on or ask George, I'm not George, sorry, I keep doing that because I see the name George. Sorry, Mr. Floyd. Roger, if it was okay to have Rick on with him, was because I don't even remember if you remember this speech, but a few years back, you shared a story. I think it was your father who someone was in your house and had said the N-word, and your father stopped him in his tracks and made a point of saying, not in our house, this is not how we speak in our house. This is not. And the fact that you shared that story in the union meeting, I know we're not supposed to share what happens in the meeting stays in the meetings, but it was one of those scenarios where I was just like, this was when things were starting to, this was way before George Floyd happened. This was way before all of that, but you could tell there was a temperature changing and there was different things that were slowly happening. And the fact that you had said that, and just in my own private life, something similar had just happened. And I was just kind of like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, you just gave people ways to explain how you're supposed to speak up for people, even if they're not there. Because there was no Black person there, but your father still made a point. There's always the right time to do the right thing. Like, you don't have to have an audience to do it. You don't have to have a video camera on you to do it, So just hearing that story, I just felt like he would be a great person to have here to speak with you and to really build that community and start doing those bridges here locally. And maybe we can be an example for other towns and cities in North Carolina. So much.
Thank you. And again, if there's anything I can do, let me know. I will do whatever I can to help.
All right.
And that goes to you too, Roger.
And thank you, Keith. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Rick, for your candor again. And we plan to take you up on that invitation that Keith just extended for you.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Great.
I want to help.
Yeah, we'll continue the dialogue.
Me too.
All right.
Like, I even have the shirt.
Camille, obviously, yes.
Okay, I was like, what about me? I'm chopping
you could definitely be an avenue for us to get things out. That's great. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. I don't know how to stay still or quiet, so I got you covered. Great. Again, thank you so much, gentlemen. I really appreciate this wonderful conversation.
Good talking.
Thank you.
Thank you again for tuning in to the eSpot with Camille. I am your host, Camille Cower. And to find out more about the George Floyd Memorial Center, please go to their website at georgefloydmc.org. Again, georgefloydmc.org. And to find out more about the eSpot, go to camillecower.com. Thanks again.